Welcome to Sales Bytes by Journey, where we talk about everything you need to know to be a killer at sales. I'm your host, Will Jenkins. Let's get it. Hello. Welcome to Sales Bytes by Journey. I'm your host, Will Jenkins, CEO and founder of Journey. And today we have Will Hopkins, founder at BlackBox Logistics. Will, how's it going?
Great, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, dude, it's been a pleasure getting to know you the last few months, man. I had a chance to see you and your business flourish from afar. So it's been really cool to learn more about you and the business that you're building. So this will be a lot of fun. I know you've got some great sales bites for the crew. So before we dive in, tell me a fun fact about you.
Man, fun fact, I could do a backflip, standing backflip.
No, just stand backflip.
Yeah, just standing. Yeah, nothing else, just standing.
That's mad athletic.
Yeah, man, I used to be an athlete. I'm past my prime now. I'll go out and play pickup basketball, and I'm breathing hard 2 times up and down the court. But back in the day, used to be an athlete.
Okay, when I see you in person, I'll make sure we warm up first, but I need to get this standing backflip. Yeah, I need to see it.
We'll make it happen, yeah.
Awesome, dude. Well, before we go ahead and start talking about sales and everything that you've done in your career here, I'd love to get just a quick 10,000 foot overview of how you got to where you are right now and some of what you're building at BlackBox.
Yeah, man. So I kind of stumbled around odd jobs, and I found myself in the freight industry about 6 years ago as a cradle to grave broker for a Roadrunner agency. Was there for about a year. I was living with 2 of my coworkers, and after about a year, we just decided, hey, let's go do our own thing. So left there, started a dispatching company, waited out some contracts. About a year later, started BlackBox. We've been running with it for the past 4.5 years or so, up to about 45 people based out of Birmingham, Alabama. And it's been good.
Let's go, man. That's awesome. 45 people in 4.5 years. That's sick.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome, man. Well, today, one of the things we're going to dive into is going to be cradle to grave sales. So I know that some of how your team is set up. I know you've got experience with that. So let's start at the top, man. Anything specific that you've learned that helps people who are cradle to grave sellers execute at a high clip?
Yeah, man. So one of the things that we try to do is give visuals, right? So if I look at a customer, what I'm trying to do, I need an objective, right? Like I wouldn't go into a game without a strategy. I wouldn't go into a call without a strategy. So number one, I mean, if we're calling somebody, we want to know like what they're doing, what we're trying to sell, right? But beyond that, because sometimes that first call can be tough, right? So even if it's just getting a point of contact. So next time I call the company and they say, hey, why are you calling? Instead of saying I'm looking to transfer to shipping, you can call and just be like, John, real quick, and they'll think that you have business being there. Get over there. And then from there, we're just trying to move the timeline over. So we go like, know, and trust. So first step, we're really selling relationship based on the cradle to grave division. We're going small to medium sized companies, not really looking for price driven customers, but ones that are going to value that service over the lowest bid, right? So we're really trying to be relationship based, not necessarily like sell the cheapest truck, but again, get them to know us, like us, and then trust us.
That's awesome. So you mentioned something there that I think is important in the way that you and your team prospect. So you're looking for customers who value service over just the lowest price. So tell me how your team goes about figuring that out in the prospecting process.
Yeah, 100%. So it kind of goes back to when I talk about that timeline. So each call, we're trying to gather more information, right? So there's key indicators that we're looking for. And a big thing is size, really, man. That sweet spot for the cradle to grave is what we found is small to medium size. We don't want them calling Walmart or Amazon, right? We want them to find that, I don't want to say mom and pop shop, but that guy that's going to give us the freight because they like us, they trust us, not just because we're $200 cheaper. And you can kind of tell that as you're progressing with these relationships, just the way that they're talking, right? And at the beginning, it can be tough, man, because most of our people, they come in green, cradle to grave. And at the beginning, it's, hey, let's take what we can get for the practice. But at a certain point, you need to start, evaluating what customer's worth our time. That can always be a tough thing for a new broker. Hey, this load list. A good way to put it. So, and I didn't make this up. There's a guy named Steve in Birmingham told me this, but I want to look at my customer relationships on like 1 to 10, 1 being BCC load list, and then 10, I'm being invited to Christmas dinner, right? And I want to be moving across that, right? So the BCC load list, all that stuff, load board warriors, we don't want to do that. So ultimately it's just building those relationships and kind of giving that, I don't want to say exclusive. It's okay if they price check us, but ultimately if somebody's lower, they're going to come back to us, and it's not just a numbers game.
I love that idea there, how to move from a BCC to like an actual invite to hang out with someone and spend time, that obviously changes based on the relationship you build with them. So let's talk a little bit more about the sales process that someone in a cradle to grave role has to work through, because there's more nuance to it. Since you're managing freight, you might also have to book the freight. How do you teach reps how to do that well and manage their day?
And so from a macro level, I'd say the most important thing is keeping the pipeline full. So they're not having to scramble to go find things. But we talk about like that lever. It's so visual for anything. So if and when I'm reaching out to somebody, I'm trying to gather that information for that next call. So if and when I'm 4 calls deep, I have something to work off of. And it's not just picking up for cold calls. So it feels like you're actually getting traction and doing something. So each call, I'm getting more tangible things written down in the CRM that I can touch base off of. And that sales process for us, again, it's not we don't want to call and just like, hey, are you moving anything? Like, what do you have going out? We're trying to build that relationship. We're trying to ask open-ended questions. We're trying to gather information, figure out who they are, what they like, what are their hobbies, match tones, and ultimately just be a likable person, not be pushy, weird, or just try to be normal, right? We're trying to build those relationships.
Yeah. So let's say we've got a cradle to grave seller that's seen some success and they landed some good SMB shippers. They're winning freight. They're profitable. But now day to day is getting hectic with operations. So they're in the nitty gritty, managing, booking, building loads, scheduling. How do you get reps focused on building constantly as they're dealing with the hectic day to day?
Man, I think that it's more of like a culture mindset thing. The way that I try to describe it to them is, imagine you're on an escalator, but it's going backwards, right? So if I'm not prospecting, if I'm not outreach, I'm going to end up at the bottom. And we see it. We got like a nice little charts. My partners, Logan's Law of Sales. We get a rep that's at a certain point and then they get relaxed and they're not prospecting. Then a customer falls off and they go back down. And at that point, at a certain point on the graph, right, you're either going to go up or you're going to drop. Because we see it, man. It's just one of those things. Customers do fall off. Somebody goes out of business or contact leaves. It just happens, right? So the pipeline's got to be full, and we got to be exploring new opportunities. And if and when it gets to a point for the cradle to grave where it's just too much, again, you go back to classifying or excluding certain customers. Like maybe we need to fire somebody. Maybe they're not a good customer just because they have loads they're giving them to you. Maybe it's not worth your time. You're spending you're spending 4 hours on this one load. Guy's not organized. He's texting, calling some like GPS coordinates. Nothing can make sense. Yeah. So sometimes not all freight's good freight. So it's about getting the most out of your time as a cradle to grave broker.
So when you think about the sales process for a cradle to grave seller, there's definitely nuance there because it's a lot more personal. That person is in the trenches for the duration of the life cycle of that opportunity. How would you teach someone to sell themselves more actively? Because I think that's different than maybe a split model where the infrastructure, the business is supporting that customer versus, Will, I'm your guy. That's a different sales process.
Yeah, so I don't think it's necessarily like a one size all. Like I would say, hey, approach everybody like this. I think that the most important thing that we would stress is to listen more than you speak. So actually hear them, what they're saying, what matters to them. Because, customer A versus customer C might value two completely different things. So we don't have completely different SOPs, but how I want to talk and operate with, Betsy might be different than Ryan at these different accounts, right? So ultimately it just comes back to really listening. And I think that a lot more of selling is listening as opposed to like talking or pitching, and then just kind of becoming who they need you to be for their operation. If it makes sense, if it's a good fit. If it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. We're not going to say that we're going to get you a bunch of tankers. We don't know what the hell we're doing with tankers, but we know it can be great, right? And we can strategize around like what this company needs and provide a solution. We can attempt to exceed expectations, be honest, and conduct business with integrity.
That makes sense, man. So if I am someone at a cradle to grave brokerage today, let's say I'm a manager and I'm working with my team, they're cradle to grave sellers, anything you've noticed as you've built that team that's effective for a manager to do to help their team go be effective?
Yeah, it's something that it's a new thing for us. It's something that you've actually taught me. And we don't try to micromanage anybody, but give them benchmarks and track progress. Either you're green and growing or you're ripe and rotten, right? So are we going up or are we going down? Because nobody's stagnant in this industry, right? So maybe, I don't even want to say tough love, but holding people accountable. Like what are we working towards? What did you accomplish today? Want everybody come in and leave work and feel like they've they've taken a step in the right direction and look back and, 6-9 months, like, wow, like I've come a long way. So yeah, I mean, ultimately monitoring, not micromanaging, but just, holding people accountable, giving them some motivation when they need it and holding them to what they say they're going to do. And if not, having them answer for it, not in a crazy way, but just like, why didn't we do this?
Totally. It's amazing what you can see people do when they know they're going to be held accountable. And most people want that. They have the desire to grow. They're there for the right reasons. They want to see their book of business do better. They want to make more money. But if you don't hold them accountable, they're going to do just what they need to do to remain in the role if they're not super just driven, the top of the top. Not everybody's wired that way, but most people want to be held accountable to an extent.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd say that most people want it, but a lot of people just get complacent, right? Or they get that one good account, they're just hanging out. And sometimes people do need that push. And ultimately, accountability is good for all of us. I mean, in my life, I've got my partners holding me accountable, my friends. And sometimes if I'm out of whack and I'm not doing anything, I need somebody to come in and be like, hey, you need to lock back in. And that's okay. That's life.
Totally, man. So as we get ready to wrap up here, I would love 1 or 2 tips for a new green cradle to grave seller. So let's say somebody's listening to this and they're just a couple weeks into building their book as a cradle to grave seller. Anything that you would say to help them?
Yeah, 2 things. And I don't know if you're going to agree with this first one. A lot of people won't. You hear a lot about diversification, right? Like, I need to diversify my book. I don't think you need to. When you first start out, I think that you need to find one industry, like one thing to move, and you need to expand your load share within that market. And then over time, you can get into new ones. But it doesn't make sense for you to be a new cradle to grave broker trying to jump from reefer to expedited to oversized. Man, it's already so much as is. Find one thing, stay in that lane, become an expert at it, and you'll have more opportunities down the road. And then 2, to circle back to what I'd mentioned earlier, learn to listen and actually listen. And when I say that, so like if somebody's talking to me, I don't need to think of my response. I need to like really let it sit with me, take a beat, and then respond, have an actual conversation as opposed to just like something that's like fragmented and feels scripty. Just be human.
Man, those are incredible tips. I'm going to read a couple things that I wrote down notes-wise. So early on, you mentioned looking for customers that value service over price and spending time getting them to know, like, and trust you. As you're looking at coaching your team, a lot of them are going after the SMB segment. It fits really well for the type of freight that they manage and the relationships that you have to develop to be a successful SMB seller. You also mentioned keeping the pipeline full, which I think is one of the most important concepts in sales, regardless of if it's cradle to grave or not. You have to keep your pipeline full. And then you mentioned listening more than you speak, and also building a niche to become an expert early on. That is huge. If you can be really, really good at one thing, you can expand. Freight's complicated enough as is when you first start. If you can gravitate to a couple things and know them well, very, very helpful. And then you also mentioned, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, I'm still learning every day. It's a lot of nuances. It's a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, same. And then you mentioned in terms of accountability, just benchmarking things and tracking them. I think that's really, really important, both for an individual and for someone that is managing a cradle to grave group.
100%.
Anything to add before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure I'll think of some stuff once we end the stream, but good for now.
Yeah, beautiful, man. Well, thank you so much for joining Sales Bytes. I really appreciate it. That was super helpful.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Enjoyed it.